But now I want to talk to you, like I said, about juice, which I know seems like it's a little bit off topic, but don't worry, we'll get back to the alcohol here in just a second. So to start, Washington is really well known for all of the rich soil, all of the access to water, eventually irrigation to be able to make things grow. So let's talk about grapes. The first grapes that were ever planted in Washington state actually came here thanks to the Hudson's Bay Company, and they were planted at Fort Vancouver in 1825. From there were lots of individuals that started moving to the state once it became a territory, and everyone kind of wanted to settle this area. So there were vineyards that were actually planted all over the state, in central Washington, eastern Washington, and yes, in western Washington, just like those first grapes in Vancouver. So the images that you see here on the left-hand side of the screen are all images that are taken from mostly the Yakima area. There's Zilla and Grange, Washington, and they're all taken about 1910. So you have lots of different grape growers, and in the wine industry, they actually refer to this rich soil as a big thank you to the Missoula floods, and they call it the F word for floods because we bring it up so much. But thanks to those ancient Missoula floods, there's all of this rich soil, all of this rich land, and then volcanic activity led to loess on top of all of this beautiful soil. So things just grow amazing here. So vineyards were planted by all sorts of different immigrant groups, French, German, Italian, who all very much enjoyed their wine. So we have all of these beautiful rich vineyards, and thanks to places like the Northern Pacific Railway start promoting settlement in the area and encourage people to come and grow grapes. And then you see this other pamphlet from our collection as well that actually talk about 20 years of knowledge about how to grow grapes in this region. Then we have a very sad day. In 1914, Washington state voters actually decide that they want to go dry, which is a little bit ahead of the rest of the country. And on December 31st, 1915, many saloons, bars, breweries, distilleries closed their doors for that final time. Some, however, got pretty creative in 1916. So here is a snapshot of one of those places. This is Olympia Brewing Company, and they were founded in 1896. They were very, very successful. They were moving beer throughout the Pacific Northwest. Here's a picture of the brew house, which you can still see from I-5, right along that corridor from Tumwater into Olympia. But when they had to close their doors, they decided that they were going to try something a little bit different. What they opted to do, and you can tell that that picture looks just like the last one. So it's still the Olympia Brewing Company, but now converted into a company that produces juice. So what Olympia Brewing Company started doing was they produced juices from all sorts of different fruits. This one was apple juice. So drink an apple, why don't you? The other product that they created was called Loju, which was actually from loganberries. And they were pretty successful for a time. But as you remember, Renee mentioned that right away we kind of get into World War I. So thanks to World War I, and you know, all of the Prohibition is very patriotic at this point. So juice seems like a good choice until rationing of sugar. So once sugar starts to get rationed, it just doesn't make sense to continue making juice. So unfortunately for Olympia Brewing Company, then creating apple juice, they had to shutter in 1921. However, that's not the end of juice for our story here about Prohibition. So I was able to find, thanks to the Eastside Heritage Center, which is located up in Bellevue, this great story about Adolf Hennig. So he found a way to turn fruit into profit during Prohibition. He continued to maintain all of the vineyards that he had planted much earlier in Bellevue. And throughout Prohibition, he continued gathering fresh fruit and selling it at the market. What people did with the fresh fruit beyond that was up to them, but a number of people did take up the craft of making their own wine at home. So they would go to the market, buy that fresh fruit, and then go back to their home to go ahead and make their own version of wine. He also started the Hennig Delicious Grape Juice Company and continued to produce juice, of course, after sugar became available post-World War I, but while Prohibition was still going on in Washington state. I would be remiss if I didn't mention this. Now, I haven't been able to find an example of a Washington brewery that's created one of these, but this is called a Grape Brick. So a number of wineries in California actually started producing grape bricks that was just a very concentrated amount of grapes. You can see if you look really closely, each brick dissolves in 1 gallon of water. And then underneath it says, to prevent fermentation, add this certain amount of soda. But on all of these bricks, they say, make sure that you prevent fermentation, turning this into wine by leaving out sugar and doing this and that. But really what they were doing was telling all of those creative home winemakers exactly how to go about producing wine thanks to these wine bricks. And then, of course, we have Repeal Day, like we mentioned before, December 5th, 1933. It's a glorious day, and right off the bat, we have companies in Washington state that capitalize and want to start making their product. One of those companies was Old St. Charles brand wine, and you can see that one in the middle. All of these are in our collection. That one in the middle was a very early one that was from grapes. But Washington didn't really get into that old world grape like we know now with like Merlots and Cabernet Sauvignon. Instead, they decided to make wine with all of these other amazing fruits that had been cultivated. So on the left, you can see the golden grape wine, and on the far right, you can see a loganberry wine. So Washington became known for all of those fruit wines before in the 1960s, really trying to experiment with those old world vines. So thanks to Prohibition, we got excellent fruit and juices, but maybe we're a little bit hindered until much later to produce those incredible wines. So that's a little bit about juice in Prohibition. Thanks for bearing with me to look at those collection items and those fun little images.